Hi everyone, welcome to my channel and welcome back. I'm Jeannie, and in today's video I'm going to be using some powders from 915 Aesthetics. I'll link above in the cards my video for my unboxing and first impressions. So I've got those two solid colors, but really the focus of today's video is showing you how I work with chunky glitters. They can be a little bit trickier to work with, but I find that they are so worth it because they are so gorgeous. So I've got this beautiful glitter here. I believe the name is Enchantment, and I got so many compliments when I was wearing it because it was so beautiful. So I'd say if you learn how to work with chunky glitters, it becomes less daunting, and they are so worth it because they are so fun. I'll also be using my 915 dip liquids because I always like to try new liquids a few times before I decide how I really feel about them. So I skipped over the solid nails because I really want to get into my glitter. So I've got the Dipped in Chaos by Chaos Concepts. This is a 3D printed out of flexible material, and I use it for pour overs to catch any of the excess powder. It could also be used as a French dip tray. So for my first layer for chunky glitters, I'm going to apply a thin, even layer of dip base to my entire nail. So I'm not going to do any of like the 3/4 method or anything like that. I want to make sure that my entire nail is covered in that dip base. And then once I've got the dip base on, I'm going to pour over the glitter onto my nail. But I don't want to pour over directly on my nail first. I start pouring over in my Dipped in Chaos. Once some of that chunky glitter falls out, then I will start pouring over onto my nail, and then I'm going to clean up my cuticle area, and then I want to make sure that these glitters are laying flat. So I'll take my finger. You don't have to use your finger because you can get glitter stuck to it. You can use like a baggie, put your finger in a baggie and help lay down your glitters that way. But you want to make sure that your glitters are laying flat. So I'm kind of pushing them down, pressing them down, making sure they're flat. If there are any that are hanging off my nail, I may push them more onto my nail. If there's any that are loose, I'm just going to remove it because I don't want a lot of chunky glitters on my first layer because that would create too much bulk. So the key really in working with chunky glitters without creating bulk is you want to catch more of the finer glitters, smaller glitters, acrylic powder in your first layer and concentrate on that and get less of the chunky glitters. So I'm going to do the same thing for my ring finger as well. So it's going to be a thin, even layer of dip base to my entire nail. And then again, you don't want to pour your glitters at first directly onto your nail because there may be chunkier glitters at the top of your jar. So I start pouring in my Dipped in Chaos first, and then once some of those chunky glitters fall out, I'm going to go ahead and pour over onto my nail. I'm going to tap my finger downwards to get off the excess glitters and powders. I want to make sure that I'm cleaning up my cuticle area, and then I'm going to start pressing down to make sure that the glitters are laying flat. I'm going to start moving some of the glitters around because I don't want them hanging off my nail onto my skin. So I'm either going to move them more onto my nail or I'm going to just knock them off completely. And then I will worry about any gaps in my second layer. And I'd say the 915 dip liquids, the dip base is really great dry time. So I'd say it's about a medium dry time. So I had plenty of time to work with my chunky glitters. It didn't dry too fast on me. The worst thing about fast drying dip bases is when you're working with chunky glitters, if you don't even have time to lay them down flat, it gets really frustrating. So when you're working with chunky glitters, make sure your dip base is a medium to slow dry time so you have enough time to work with your glitter. So here's how we look after the first layer. Second layer, I'm going to dump my entire jar of glitter into my Dipped in Chaos, and then I'm going to shake it to bring all the chunky glitters to the surface because your second layer is where you want to really focus on getting your most amount of chunky glitters. Oh, and I forgot. I'm going to do a little bit of ombre on my solid nail on my index finger. So I'm applying an even layer of dip base to my entire nail. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to take my eyeshadow brush, dip it into the glitter, and then I'm going to point my finger to the left a little bit, and then I am going to... No, that's my right side. I need to learn my sides. And I'm going to tap some of the glitters onto my nail just so they catch in the dip base. But I only wanted about half of my nail. I don't want it to cover my entire nail. I just want that ombre that's closest to my full glitter nail on my middle finger. And again, the same thing though is I'm going to press down to make sure that those glitters are laying flat. Sometimes when I'm doing a glitter ombre like this, I'll only apply dip base to a little past halfway of my nail and do it that way, but it can be a little bit uneven. So I generally like to do my full nail, do my glitter ombre, and then pour clear on the rest of my nail where there is still the wet dip base. And that way you kind of get more fuller, even coverage rather than just glitter on half your nail. So once I've got that done, I'm going to dust off the excess powder. I wanted to make sure that my dip base was fully dry. And for my second layer, I shook my dipped in cast to bring all the chunkier glitters to the top, to the surface, because they will sink. So in order to get the maximum amount of chunky glitters, make sure you're either shaking your jar or tapping it against your table to bring those to the top. And then once I've got my dip base on, I am going to lay my finger flat in the glitters. And you'll see here it is packed with chunky glitters, almost actually too much. So I do end up having to knock a few off because it just gets too cluttered. It gets too chunky. So I want to make sure I have good coverage, but there's also such thing as too much coverage. So that's the good thing I can say about these 915 glitters is they are packed with beautiful glitters. So same thing, I'm going to make sure that these are laying flat. If there's any hanging off, I'm just going to knock them off. If there's any that are kind of like half on the nail, half on my skin, I may move them more towards so they're covering my entire nail, or I may knock them off depending on like how well they're sticking and where they're at. But you know, that's really my whole process for applying the chunky glitters. So I'm just showing you here how the glitters look after 2 dips. So the good thing is they laid pretty flat, but you can see it's pretty uneven because of the chunky glitters. Unless you plan not to file and buff, you always want to make sure that you're encapsulating your glitters. So I'm using the 915 Aesthetics Clear, but you don't have to use clear dip powder if that's not what you choose to use. So if you're doing gel method, I wouldn't recommend using clear because that doesn't mix well with your gels. So if you don't want to use clear dip powder, you could also use your gel base and gel top coat to encapsulate your glitters. Or you could use a gel base and clear builder gel to encapsulate, but you always want to make sure that you're protecting your glitters before you file and buff, because if you don't, you'll file through those glitters, and then most glitters have a silver center. So then you lose that beautiful color of your glitters. So what I'm doing is I'm actually applying a generous amount of dip base to my nail. I actually apply more dip base than I do on like a regular dip powder layer. And then I pour over my glitters because I don't want to contaminate my jar of clear. And then I'm going to pat down the clear, because I really want that clear and the dip base to really get into the nooks and crannies, because as you kind of saw after I was finished with my second layer, it was uneven. So I'm just making sure that I'm filling in all the areas, all the nooks and crannies, so that everything is as even as possible. And that's kind of why I apply a thicker layer of dip base than I normally do. And then of course I'll clean around my cuticle area, and then I will just let that dry. If you find after you encapsulate that your nail is still uneven, you can go in with a second layer of clear dip powder, but you want to make sure that your clear is clear, or else you could run the risk of it looking grainy and cloudy because of the multiple layers of clear. Luckily, I found with the 915 Aesthetics glitters that they laid flat enough to where I didn't need a second layer of clear, because one layer covered it all. So now that my dip base is fully dry, I'm making sure to give my nails a good scrub with a stiff scrub brush that removes any of the excess clear and that removes any graininess or cloudiness. And then for the activator, I'm going to use the baggy trick for this, which is a total game changer. So I'm going to do one nail at a time, and I'm going to apply a generous amount of activator to my nail because I want to make sure I'm penetrating all the layers. And you can see when I first apply the activator, my nail looks wet. So you want to do this trick when your nail is starting to get matte, when your activator is starting to dry but not fully dry. So you can see I sort of tested it to make sure my baggie wasn't sticking, and once I know my baggie's not sticking, that's when you know you can go in. So I wrap the baggie around my nail and I start pressing down the glitters. So that way when the activator is drying, your glitters are laying down flat because you're pressing them down as the activators are drying, and it makes it super smooth and super easy. So I'm going to show you on one more nail. So I'm applying a generous amount of activator to the entire nail, and you can see that the activator is wet. So you want to find that sweet spot of your activator is starting to dry, but it's not fully dry, so you can still press down. So I just tested, it was sticking a little bit, but I'm going to keep testing until I'm ready. So now that I'm ready and the baggie is no longer sticking, I'm going to start pressing down. So I wrap the baggie around my nail and I start pressing down. So I'm kind of smoothing it out, pressing down as the activator's drying. And that way you get the smoothest surface, and that eliminates like worrying about having to file through glitters because they lay so flat and it's so smooth. Just look at that. It is a total game changer when working with chunky glitters. I went ahead and filed and buffed off camera, so here's how we're looking. So everything is super smooth. It was super easy to file. I didn't file through any glitters because of the baggy trick. These glitters were so easy to work with. So now I'm ready to get into my dip top coat. The first time I used the 915 Aesthetics dip top coat, it wasn't as shiny as I would have liked, and I was surprised. So I'm going to try it again and see if I get better shine this time around. And spoiler alert, it was beautiful, and that was exactly what I was looking for. I applied my final layer of activator. I waited a full 2 minutes. This time I did not wipe my nails with a lint-free wipe, and I'm going in with my dip top coat. So I'm doing 2 to 3 really quick swipes on each nail, wiping off any lint-free wipe in between each nail before returning my brush to the bottle. And then once I'm done with all 5 nails, I'll go in with my second layer of dip top coat. And that's when I'm going to really take my time, make sure everything's fully covered. I want to make sure that I'm capping my free edge as well. As always, I'm going to finish off my mani by rehydrating my cuticle. So I'm using my scales of a Mermaid cuticle oil in the scent You're Berry Sweet. You see me use this a lot because it is one of my favorites. I love it. Strawberry is one of my favorite fruity scents. And it just kind of is summertime to me. And I feel like the mani is kind of berryish, so I think it kind of matches as well. So here we are with the finished look. What do you think? I absolutely love these colors. And like I said before, the first time I used the 915 dip liquids, I wasn't really super happy with the top coat. And I wasn't sure whether it was user error or whether it was a top coat. But trying it again, it was super shiny, and I am so happy I gave them another shot. So definitely highly recommend these dip liquids. They were super easy to use. They gave me enough dry time for the chunky glitters. And look at how beautiful these chunky glitters are. Absolutely obsessed. Still can't recommend 915 Aesthetics enough. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up. It lets me know to continue creating content like this, and it also helps YouTube recommend me to others, which helps grow my channel. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I upload content every Monday and Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.